This week on Forward.
We're in this not just for 2024, but 2026 and beyond. We do see a world in the future that looked something like the past when the most liberal Republican and the most conservative Democrat overlapped and there was a middle and they got things done. So however we do that, whether getting those parties to overlap or in this case, creating a group of independents that are in the middle that can work with both sides, we want to get to that future.
It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast independent candidate for Congress in Nevada's 2nd District, fellow Brown University graduate, Greg Kidd. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me.
No problem. I have a funny story to tell, Greg. So I was in Nevada on Forward type work, and then I turned on the TV and saw your ad and thought to myself, what on earth? There's this cool independent running for Congress. So this is something of a recurring theme here on the podcast, but would love to hear your formation story and how the heck you came to this congressional run.
Well, it's very simple. I am from the tech industry. I have been involved in a number of issues that have been under what we might say you have to litigate to innovate, political issues that have gone to the Supreme Court. And most of my challenges in life today aren't business or technical, they're political. And so instead of being on the outside, trying to convince people on the inside, I made the leap and said, I'd like a seat at the table and have more direct access and get a chance to work with both Democrats and Republicans to get common sense legislation passed, not just in my industry, but in a number of areas that have been thwarted in recent years.
So please do share your development arc. You spent your early career in the tech industry and I believe finance as well.
Yeah, I came up through Booz Allen and Hamilton, a consulting firm. I then went off to do a startup in all things in the bike messenger space, but think of it as Dispatch, early Uber. That started with 10 bike messengers in New Zealand. It grew to be world's largest on-demand dispatch organization. We learned a lot about text messaging and payments. That company went public. A young kid named Jack Dorsey was interested in Dispatch, hacked in to show me some vulnerabilities, hired him. He came to live with me. I wasn't his mentor. He was really more the mentor for me, talking to me about things like what open source, what Java, educated me about those trends. He was living with me when he started Twitter. So I put some money in there, had some early roles. Same thing with Square. And sort of the rest is a Forrest Gump history. I did continue to work on the regulatory front. I was a senior analyst at the Federal Reserve at the board and the payments group and worked with a bunch of ex-regulators through the financial crisis in regulatory issues related to everything from financial collapses to money laundering schemes. And between those two careers, I've had an interesting position between Wall Street, Washington, and Silicon Valley. And that brought me to today, where a lot of our issues, especially in the crypto and the fintech industry, have been regulatory clarity or the lack thereof. And currently, many of my portfolio companies spend a lot more money being sued by the SEC and others than they would be spending if they were actually in the political system. And I think you've seen a number of tech folks who used to be kind of Washington, D.C. phobic before have realized you got to be in the game to win the game or even survive the game. And so I've switched over from one dark side to the other. Now I'm not in the, not at the Fed. I'm directly in elected politics for the first time in my life.
You must know Jim McKelvey from the Fed and Jack Dorsey.
Well, yes, I know Jim was, he was the other co-founder for Square, and he was the guy that really took the lead on the hardware side of Square.
Yeah, so Jack has been on the podcast. Jack supported my presidential run 4 years ago, in part because he is a proponent of universal basic income, also one of the funders of Humanity Forward. So been an admirer of Jack's work. The first time I met Jack Dorsey was in Detroit, Michigan. He was touring for Square, and we were both speakers at a conference called Techonomy. So small business, very near and dear to Jack's heart. The Midwest, I mean, he was from St. Louis. It's one reason why Square has such deep roots in that part of the country, including with Jim McKelvey, who's a friend. You've certainly been in a number of different industries. How long have you been in Nevada?
I've been a resident in Nevada for 3 years, but I've been coming here to basically mountain bike, ride, and race in the Sierras for really decades.
So you have spent time in the Lake Tahoe area where I have some friends, and you're looking up at this regulatory landscape. You're a part of various companies that are now running afoul of regulators and dedicating resources. I have friends who are in this boat, and they think to themselves, like, I didn't get into this to fight it out with regulators. I got into this to innovate and create some value. And then you looked up and said, hey, maybe I should look at running for Congress. Who's the incumbent? What's going on? And you're running as an independent, which obviously makes me like you because I'm someone who thinks that independents are now going to be necessary to try to talk some sense into either side or both sides. But what has your involvement with politics been previously? It's clear that this is your first campaign, but did you have folks, and it's kind of hard to avoid in our circles where you have to deliberately avoid it if you if you're trying to.
Well, look, it's been, I mean, all the way back to my days at the Federal Reserve back around 2002, everything's been inherently political. Whether you're making a decision whether to let Walmart and retailers into the banking industry, whether you need to evaluate whether Western Union has a monopoly and did it obtain it fairly, whether you're deciding whether the money that's in PayPal or even like bonus miles, whether that's part of the money supply, all those issues have been inherently political. At the Fed, we try to make it no more political than it needs to be. Most of these issues I view should be bipartisan issues, but we all know that these things become political footballs and certain causes get carried by one party and certain causes get carried by the other party. For most of the things I'm working on, I simply need there to be nonpartisan support for sensible regulation. And so I'm always looking to get a number of folks on both sides of the aisle to support legislation that gives us clarity so we can innovate without looking over our shoulders as to whether we're going to get hauled into court 3 or 4 years after we build something that's successful. And then there's a whoops moment and they said, well, you shoulda, coulda, woulda. And then you're spending your time in court rather than developing new products and doing customer support.
So you're clearly an accomplished, successful person, but I'm sure many people thought you were crazy when you said, hey, guys, I think I'm going to run for Congress. And as a first-time candidate, for sure, there were folks who wanted to advise. I think your deciding to run as an independent is very principled. So what was that process like? When did you start kicking the tires on it? And then when did you look at your family and say, okay, we're doing this thing?
Well, in recent years, anywhere that I've been living, I've always taken an interest in the politics. But when I came to Nevada in particular, I quickly found out that I'm living in a district, it's a +8 Republican district, and really hasn't been a competitive race here for some time. And yet I'm in a purple state, and all the rest of the state is competitive. But my district has not been, primarily because it has a lot of rural areas in addition to Reno. And so the question was just the puzzle, like, how would you be relevant here? How would you actually be competitive here? And I did find that the existing candidate has not really had any real competition here for over a decade and has sort of a sleepy record in Congress. He's way down in terms of like what legislation's been passed, and he's sort of indicative of a do-nothing gridlock in Congress. And so it looked like maybe I could make a difference. And the simple mechanics and the nums for the second district is Democrats are generally not competitive. Republicans, pretty easy time here. And so I did actually register Republican. I filed independent, and I've worked with Democrats, gotten endorsements from Democrats, and I'm aligned with Democrats on a bunch of issues, not all of them. And so given that situation, it made perfect sense to be nonpartisan, work with people on both sides of the aisle, and really speak to the other folks that are registered nonpartisan, said, here's a chance for you to have a voice so that we can work on and vote for just common sense legislation, regardless of which side of the aisle it started with.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Yeah, 90% of the congressional districts in the country are essentially uncompetitive, and so the incumbent hasn't really had to campaign meaningfully against anyone in the general, for sure. So Nevada's second district is pretty normal in that regard. It's one reason why I think your race is so fascinating, is that the Democrats are just like, whatever, Nevada always gets the second district, and let's not go near it. And you're going to test that. Now, one way you're testing that is by putting your own resources to work. And so since you and I are operators, you looked at this and said, okay, what's a budget going to be to really contend? And then how are you going to get that money? I get the sense that some of that money is coming from you, which to me is always like a sign of commitment on the part of an insurgent candidate.
Absolutely. We're self-funded, and we've told folks, folks have offered to donate money, but we've said, look, there's other races and candidates that are probably more worthy of that, given our situation, that, we're in a comfortable situation financially to make this race competitive without taking additional contributions.
Well, that's in some ways awesome. But I will say, Greg, one of the things that can help you get people excited and behind you is that they feel like they've invested in you, even if it's 10, 20 bucks. So I'd certainly encourage you to encourage others to say, hey, just donate $5 so you can be part of the movement.
Well, we will take people's money, and we're just letting them know there's other causes, things like Planned Parenthood. We're the only pro-choice candidate in the election. And so, the reality is we're generally passing that money on, but it is part of the process of people committing and buying in. And I have been appreciative of people that have actually offered and made that kind of support. But I just want to be upfront that we are, this is primarily a self-funded campaign.
No, I like your forthrightness about that. I've seen different people take different approaches. And one of the fascinating aspects is there are some candidates who are very, very rich, who really, really seem to shy away from putting their own money into the campaign, which I always thought was a little bit odd, honestly. It's like, well, shoot, you're the highest commitment person here, obviously. And, we know you've got it. So if you're not doing it, what does that signal? And that's clearly not you. So, so good on you.
Well, I don't mean to be mercurial about this, but it's all just part of, just given how public the other investments and causes I'm involved in. I will say this is just part of brand development, not so much just for me, but around issues that we're concerned about. Obviously, there are things in my sector, the financial sector. There's a whole bunch of legislation before Congress that's been getting kicked around like a football, things like Fit 21, but also things like the Safer Banking Act, which will help resolve the issue of how does cannabis get banked, to the Postal Banking Act, which is to basically allow people in rural areas to have access to banking services they wouldn't otherwise get.
Yes, please.
So there's a fair access to banking. And so this range of issues I've just mentioned spans from all Republicans to all Democrats to something in between. And then there's all the other issues we care about. I care about what's going on in foreign policy in the Ukraine. I have very strong feelings. We have strong business interests there. We have 3.5 million users in the Ukraine for one of my portfolio companies. We're very interested in what happens with choice and the role of women. And my mother of my kids is a OB-GYN. She does early term deliveries, late stage abortions when there's a medical need. Did a couple of cesareans the other day. So these are kitchen table issues. So all these things are, already what like anchors and grounds my life. So this just seems, it just seems like the time. The planets are aligned. We're in a very fluid situation. Congress is very closely balanced. And so someone who's independent could actually make a difference in terms of what things get talked about, what things get out of committee and get to a vote and get voted for.
So I'm sure people ask you all the time about how competitive your race is. I think my instinct is that if you get the word out, then people will give you a very, very eager hearing because there are a lot of folks who aren't really in either camp, honestly. The fact that you're an independent probably gets you a better reception in a lot of parts of the district.
Well, the polls have come in better and faster than we had anticipated with the pacing. And so even the Republican poll had us within the margin of error, and they said Amadei should be worried. And so when, his own party is saying they should be worried, then, we kind of get doubly motivated to keep doing what we're doing and try a couple of new things. But we're in the hunt now. And so this always was a winnable race, but now we're really, we're down to, there's 35% that are undecided. Amadei and I are neck and neck. So it really comes down to like what our story is. How do we close the deal? How do we give permission to vote to that group of people that are still undecided? And it's a pretty big number here in the district.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. This year, what are you going to do that's going to make your life a little better? Maybe, just maybe, you should upgrade your mattress because that's going to help you sleep better. You're going to be able to attack the day with more energy, vitality. It might even keep you healthier. Can a mattress do all that? You might as well find out for yourself, and don't take my word for it. Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress pick by GQ and Wired magazine. It is even recommended by multiple leading chiropractors and doctors of sleep medicine as a go-to solution for improving your sleep. I took the Helix sleep quiz and was matched with a Dawn Firm mattress because I wanted something that felt firm, and I sleep on my back. How do you sleep? Go to Helix Sleep. Take the sleep quiz to find out. This mattress was made for me, but now my kids don't want to sleep on anything else. That tells you all you need to know. Helix is offering 25% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. That's helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. So it seems like the issues that you're running on include sensible approach to banking and the financial space, women's right to choose, which I'm sure will be very, very exciting to a lot of people in the district because, right now they're represented by someone who's on the other side of that. The Ukraine, by the way, I agree with your stance in that I've always been pro supporting the Ukrainian people because in my mind, if they're going to fight and die for their country and what's being asked of us is to send the materiel and the resources, that strikes me as a fairly straightforward call, particularly when on the other side of it you have Putin, and you can't be rewarding acts of aggression where you have people literally invading neighbors, like the U.S., in my mind, is very much on the other side of that type of aggression. So are there other issues that you lead with in terms of when someone asks you, which I'm sure you get all the time on the trail, it's like, hey, so you're running as an independent, fascinating. What are like the top things you want to get done?
Well, just in Nevada, in my district, just to educate folks, 2nd District, we're the leading producer of gold for the entire United States. We're biggest producer of silver in the continental United States, and we have what's perhaps the largest lithium reserve, basically in Winnemucca, north of Winnemucca. It's called Thacker Pass. We have enough lithium there to produce 10% of the cars for the United States for the next 40 years. And so economic development around these assets is critical. And the question is, are we going to do it kind of the way we did it before, back with legislation back to 1864, picks and shovels? We didn't really put any of the money aside to invest in Nevada's future. We're going to do something like Alaska and Norway and have a sovereign wealth fund, a permanent fund, to basically take some of the money that comes out of the ground and invest it in Nevada's future. And so there are other acts that will help us that have been in Congress, things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really an infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act. All of that has substantial money for Nevada to develop these resources, not just for the state and the district, but for the country. And I highly support those. So does the Republican governor. So does the former Republican governor, who's head of the university, which receives a lot of those grants. But because we have a type of Republican that basically votes against anything that has any Democratic support, he's voted against bills that bring federal dollars in these key strategic areas to the state. And so our current representative is not only not aligned with Democrats and nonpartisan, he's even at odds with the Republicans in his party that are here in Nevada, because he's pleasing some other Republicans, and he's putting basically party ahead of the district, the state, the country, the people. And that's just gotten out of whack. Folks realize that in the city and the rural areas, and that really has created the opening here.
Yeah, it's ideology over governance, really. Investing in the district and the state makes sense to just about everybody, but then you have some folks who don't approach it in real life terms. They approach it as if it's some kind of strange ideological battle, and then people who are running institutions of the district are like, "Hey, this is actually going to be good for us, regardless of what party you're from."
It is, and he can't have a candidate that's showing up, and he does still show up at ribbon cutting exercises, but those are projects he voted against, right?
Sure.
And he'll always have some technical reason. Well, the bill wasn't perfect, the perfect being the enemy of the good. It's just like the Ukraine. Oh, I like the Ukraine. I like Planned Parenthood. Did you give them any money? No. That's why you have a 0% rating from Planned Parenthood. You can still say, oh, I like Planned Parenthood. How'd you get a 0% rating? That doesn't just happen because of the weather. And so folks, they can look at the record. They can look at what bills have been voted for or what haven't. And, it's the same thing with immigration. He has not been voting for any of the legislation that would actually strengthen. You can always say, well, it's not perfect. But the bill that came out of senator in the state where I have my bank in Oklahoma had a lot of Republican support. It was a Republican bill that picked up Democratic support. And when it got caught up in political theater, when Trump said, hey, I don't want any progress in immigration, even if it comes from our party, kill that bill, that bill went down in flames. Even though it was started in good faith with Republicans, they killed their own bill. And, Amadee's been part of that process of basically doing nothing because there's not a perfect solution. And that's not how real politics works. That's how theater politics work.
Yeah.
You get a pat on the back for vetoing everything. But that's where Amadee's ended up. And folks know it in the district. And so it's not exactly rocket science for me for what, I need to do. And I'm not beholden to the party to for my committee position or my meaning in life. And so I will be voting for what's good for the country, what's good for the district.
So, Greg, I'm happy to say that the Ford Party is endorsing you because you are just the kind of person that we'd love to see in office, and that you've signed the pledge, which is around working with people from both parties, very natural for you. Respecting the rule of law, also, I'd suggest pretty natural for you. So thrilled to be working with you at that level, and thrilled for Ford to get behind you.
Absolutely supportive of those principles. Great to be part of it.
Yes, you're going to be awesome. And one thing I also like about you is that You're a long-term player. These problems aren't going away.
Yep, we're in this not just for 2024, but 2026 and beyond. I mean, we've been working on this for decades. Anyways, we do see a world in the future that looked something like the past when the most liberal Republican and the most conservative Democrat overlapped and there was a middle and they got things done. So however we do that, whether getting those parties to overlap or in this case, creating a group of independents that are in the middle that can work with both sides, we want to get to that future that had some of the advantages of the past when we could get more done than we're able to in this current gridlocked Congress.
Amen, brother. Just each side, just being able to pin it on the other side is so noxious and counterproductive. So having players who can navigate that genuinely and say, look, guys, we're open for business. Like we actually want to get things done because we care. We actually want to deliver real solutions.
That's it.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. I have a dream, Greg, that you might be one of the reasons why they need to find a third coat room, a third cafeteria, a third place for people to hang out. But I'm sure you get this question all the time, which is, if you were to arrive in DC, which party would you caucus with?
Well, I don't think I'm going to caucus with either party on all the issues, right? So I will definitely be closer to the Republicans on some of the issues related around getting legislation out there to regulate things like fintech and crypto and some of the new emerging innovation industries, which to date have been regulated only through like litigation, basically regulation through enforcement. Obviously, I'm going to be working with the Democrats on a bunch of social issues, including choice. Many of those issues I will be working with
Ukraine, unfortunately.
Ukraine. Although, look, on the Ukraine issue, there's a lot of traditional Republicans that feel very strongly that we should support Ukraine. And
yeah,
look, I read history. It's never been a good investment to avoid paying $1 to an appeaser, right? And so I'm not just talking about the Ukraine. There's also Poland, the Baltics, and it's never worked well to save $1 by paying off an appeasing somebody like Putin. He's told us what he's going to do. I believe him, right? And so,
he's demonstrated it for sure through his actions.
But that's just going to be expensive. That's like saying
it gets more expensive, not less expensive. Agree.
Yeah, that's like saying I'm going to save money by not putting oil in the engine of my car. And so, and look, a lot of Republicans get that, and they've been a leader on that historically. But there's a group that basically are, they're in the appeasement camp, and they're just going to bury their head. And that's happened before in the U.S. in history, and it's never ended well. And so,
well, Greg, you could shuttle back and forth between the two caucuses. Maybe we can even get you some friends in there who can become part of this third lane. How has the experience of campaigning been for you? Because I know it's always a massive adjustment, particularly for someone like you who, has had this thriving, successful business career, and then you start saying, "Hey, I'm running for Congress," then people will come ask you about this, talk to you about that. How's that experience been for you?
Well, it's not that different from some of the other industries we've been, like when you're in Twitter or Square. I mean, you get all sorts of requests about all sorts of things, anyways, about people's obscure problems and challenges. And so,
Interesting.
yeah, I get new tough questions about, like, well, what are we going to do about the wild horses? Some people love the wild horses. Other people think, well, they're invasive, and they
I think Wild might be in your campaign ad too.
yeah. But they're like, yeah, but they're competing with the bighorn sheep, and I've been told by very reliable sources that, Greg, whatever you say and do is going to be wrong, right? Like, you're not, that there's certain issues that you have to deal with as a politician, that you're just going to get the crap beaten out of you, and that's one of them. And I'm finding a number of those, which are like the unsolvable issues that they're still coming to you to solve, and I don't have all the answers, but it has been great just getting to know the history. Like, one of the things I found, I'm sort of obscurely related to Mark Twain. He was one of the first
What?
white men to come to Lake Tahoe. And the great thing about it, I found out, was he was camping here and he practically burned the whole place down. Sort of embarrassing. And so you find out about these fun facts that kind of tie you to the history of the place. And there's a lot of Wild West history here in Nevada.
Well, there is that. Congratulations on taking on this campaign, putting your own resources to work. You could be a very, very exciting antidote to the culture of perfect as the enemy of the good, or I don't need to get anything done, or there is really no choice except for me, or let's take the voters for granted. You could be an antidote to all of those things. And having an independent like you running in a district like the one you're running in, I think is tremendous. I think it's a great fit for Nevada as a state. There's certainly a massive independent strain there. And what I love about it too is that you're your own person. You're just coming at this and saying, hey, what do I think? How can we solve the problems? It's what most voters want. And I'm excited to try and be helpful to you in your campaign. If someone wants to check you out, tell their friends who might live near Reno and Lake Tahoe, how can they best do that and get involved?
Well, there's Kid for Nevada, the website, and there's a contact us. So whether it's like you want to organize like a meet and greet, get lawn signs, you have like maybe you want to have a town hall. I'm coming up. I'm doing a rural tour. I've done one before already. So just tell us who in your district wants to meet. Like, we want to meet folks in the rurals. They might be near the military base. Well, that's can't do too much. Can't do things on the military base. Obviously, ranchers, folks that are in the mining industry. I've been out to see the tribes. We have a lot of Native Americans in the area. Just let us know, and we'll get on the calendar, and we'll come to you.
Listen to that. Imagine your member coming to you. So it's Kid with 2 Ds for Nevada.com. He's got a very nice website and campaign ads. So tell your friends in Nevada's 2nd District, which is the Reno Lake Tahoe area. And I think I'm actually coming out that way to be campaigning for Question 3, which is trying to get rid of the primaries in Nevada. So people who keep up with me, Greg, know that we see the ballot initiative in Nevada this November as one of the most important things going on. That most people, obviously, all the attention is always on presidential and these other races. But we think that ballot initiative is crucial.
That's going to be another one. We've seen something like that. I used to be a resident of New Zealand, so I've seen this come through in other countries. And so I'm excited about innovation in every area, including in how we basically
how we vote. Let's make it so that people can vote for who they want. And so someone like Greg Kidd can run and win. Greg, looking forward to seeing you on the trail, and hopefully people will get behind you and you will end up causing a need for a 3rd chamber, a 3rd bathroom, whatever the heck they need in the Capitol.
Very good. happy for anything I can do in that regard. Thanks for your time, Andrew.